the SportsRap podcast right here on Heat 100 Radio. And you know what I told you. You know what we got coming up. We're gonna talk about this NIL bill, and we're gonna give you a little background. We're gonna talk about it, and we talked about it before when it was introduced. But to give you our history and leading up to before we even knew there was going to be an NIL bill, we always go back to it, and we talk about the Ben Simmons documentary when he was in between leaving LSU and transitioning into the NBA. So, with that being said, there's a particular part in that documentary, not to forget the title, but you can Google the Ben Simmons documentary and find it, where he was in his room, his sister calls him, and her first response is, yo, dude, you supposed to be in class. Like, how are you in your room doing this and doing that and whatever? Well, he said, I came here to do one thing. I came here because they told me I had to come. And I came here to continue to play basketball the American way so I can get to the NBA. He also said in that documentary about the compensation for athletes. And he broke it down. And I'm sure when he broke it down the way he broke it down, a lot of people looking at that documentary as a fan and thinking they have an understanding of college athletes or high profile college athletes. He said he was given room and board, nice little apartment, whatever, because it's a D1 school, big time school, whatever. They got the money for that. He said, but I got to go to Walmart and buy my blinds and bedding and things of that nature. He said, because now that I'm here and I'm this high profile athlete, the NCAA is now itemizing everything that I spent. There was also, just to touch on that, there was an instance where he bought a gold chain, and his sister helped him get some customized sneakers on Nike, which any college person can do if you go on the Nike website, Nike.com, and if you got the money or your parents give you the money, however way you can pay for it, anybody can go on Nike.com and design a shoe. It's a feature on this customized shoes. Anybody can do it. But again, because he was that high profile athlete, yo, like, what is he doing? Is he trying to create something where he can gain a profit? We ain't gonna get none of that, so the problem aroused well, not the problem, but the discussion he made was, he walks around the university, he goes into the university bookstore, he goes into other schools' stadiums to play games, and he sees thousands and thousands of people wearing an LSU jersey, and for that particular school, their NCAA rights and guidelines or whatever allow them to have the name on the back and the replicas. Right. Because that was what they did at LSU as far as actually being on the basketball team. So again, you got thousands and thousands of people wearing jerseys with my name on the back. The NCAA is getting licensing rights fees from that. The institution that I'm officially at is getting some kickback from that. And then universities all across the country, possibly if I'm selling the Ben Simmons jersey in Philly, some of the universities here, because it's an NCAA official licensing, are getting some kickbacks from that. So he says, but I'm the one out there doing all the work. Why can't I get some of that? And just to add this in, people, again, when I said people were watching that documentary arguably and thinking that they understand the life of a top tier college athlete, let alone just a college athlete, you have to understand their schedule is much heavier than the regular college student.
Right.
Okay, they have a class schedule, whatever, but then let's just stay there with the high profile athletes at high profile schools. They have a lot more to do as far as basketball or whatever respective sport is concerned. There's study hall, there's film sessions, there's practice. If they're at a top tier school, there's meetings. It's just the way things are run. So you look at the normal or the typical college athlete, you get room and board, you get a meal plan, but you have to have people that work in that cafeteria, that cook and clean. So at some point they shut down and go home.
Mm-hmm.
So 9 times out of 10, or let's be nice and say 7 times out of 10, those athletes are missing, or sometimes don't even have that meal plan, because it's really like a moot point, because with their busy schedule, the majority of the time, by the time they get done with their schedule, those people that work in the cafeteria are going home to be with their family. The cafeteria is closed.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't get that advantage. So now in comes the name, image, and likeness bill. Something that I believe the NCAA was against for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, they got some push. I think it was from somewhere in California. They got some push. They got it written into a bill. Got it in front of the Supreme Court. California, I think, passed it early, but it went into effect July 1st.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the fiscal year for a lot of businesses, July 1 of this year to June 30th of the following year. So now it's in the fiscal plan. And what it is the name, image, and likeness. And it's kind of putting the hands around the neck of the NCAA, because in this bill, in this law now, these young athletes can formally hire agents. They can formally sign advertising or endorsement deals to gain compensation for these companies using their name,
mm-hmm.
their image, or their likeness, which has been going on since forever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great feat for these young athletes. And it's somewhat of a double feat for the popular social media athletes now, who have had great followings just on social media. Now they can incorporate that into their name, image, and likeness bills and compensate off of that. Perfect example, there are 2 young ladies, and I think they are at like the University of Wisconsin or something like that. They're sisters. Have a amazing social media following, and they just signed a contract with the company. It escapes me right now, but I did read it. They have a deal that's going to allow them to incorporate their social media, which is a heavy following.
Mm-hmm.
So in that instance, it's a win-win for both, for those young ladies, and it's a win for whatever companies are being interested in them and having them endorse their products. So we talked a little bit off air before, and just to be exact with you, originally beginning on July 1st, athletes in 8 states were going to be able to take advantage of these changes. And these 8 states are Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, New Mexico, Ohio, and Texas. So you heard those names that I just gave. There's 1, 2, 3,
There's only
4,
one East Coast.
5.
Ohio's the only East Coast.
Ohio's the only East Coast teams, but there are 5.
Well, Northeast.
Right.
Northeast.
You got New Mexico, but
everybody else is pretty much Southern or Midwest.
Everybody else is Southern, Midwest, but I believe it's 4, arguably 5 teams that are in, or states that have schools in one of the Power 5 conferences, the SEC.
It naturally, but the one thing that I'm thinking about in terms of the actual deal, and when people start understanding what the likeness is and all that stuff, let's do the most minute thing. The most minute thing will be, you're an announcer. Arkansas is playing. You nickname this kid Big Nasty. Corliss Williams. You call, oh, he's nasty. He's the Big Nasty. Okay. Now what happens is people start wearing shirts
Big nasty.
with University of Arkansas, Big Nasty. Who owns the rights to that? It is your likeness. But someone who created somewhat of that image for you can claim it and trademark it. So they can trademark your name, make money, but because it's your likeness, you can also be compensated. So I want people to understand, and this is kind of crazy, because last night I was with my homies. I was with my homies, and we was sitting there talking, and his homie's fiance, who's in the trade market, and we was having this conversation, and she said everything has to be based on being able to trademark that product, to be able to get paid twice off your likeness. Get paid by your likeness and get paid off a trademarking of a name connected to you. So you'll get paid twice.
Right.
If you can trademark it and then promote it and then it soars, you're getting paid twice. And I didn't think about it like that. I just thought about, you know, colleges using a player's name, whether on a video game or whatever. Like they actually now have to get permission, not from the college, but from the player, to even put them on a Sports Illustrated. Because you're using my likeness to be sold on a Sports Illustrated magazine. Now, when you sign your contract to go to that college also has some rights of you being a collegiate student on their university. But this is where all this, it gets a little fuzzy.
It gets fuzzy.
It gets fuzzy.
Absolutely.
Because a player can easily say, well, I don't want to be on the Sports Illustrated without them, you know what I mean? Because again, the minute my image is on there, somebody can say, oh man, you know what? Like Zion Williamson. Man, I'm gonna get that Zion Williamson jersey. You're not from Duke or South Carolina, but you go get this because you saw that on a magazine. All that the NCAA lost $600 million during the pandemic. Through the insurances, they were able to recoup $250.
So they still short.
Right. They were
in their eyes.
So what happens is, when it was all said and done on a base revenue, they had only lost about $56 million. Because the insurance pretty much covered half, and then other revenues came in, and you know what I mean? So they were able to recoup most of it. Insurance paid half of it, and then they only had to kick out about $56 million, when normally they'd be kicking out $700 million. You know what I mean? So they're in the perfect spot to come right back around and recoup billions the next year, because everything's open. You know what I mean? And they ain't have a choice. They didn't have a choice, because this problem of using these kids' likeness is on the forefront of everybody's mind. You know what I mean? And so, you know, addressing it was one thing, but still some fuzzy errors in there where,
like you said, the NCAA is finding, they're going to search and find loopholes to keep their hand in the cookie jar.
Oh yeah,
like,
that's what they got lawyers for.
NCAA, they'll never be completely out. Like, they're going to technically, or using the language, the terminology, as far as business wise, they're going to lose some money.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Because, but they normally profit so much that it's not really, as we like to say, not really going to make that much of a dent or a dent at all in it. But they're going to see parts of it. And that's just how business goes when you have these multi-billion-dollar conglomerates. They're never going to be completely out of the picture. Percentages and everything are going to drop, but they'll never be completely out of the picture.
Oh, they'll never be out of the picture. It's too much money on the table.
Again, like I mentioned, there are these two young ladies, basketball players, that have this dynamic, dynamic following on Instagram, that are going to definitely profit a lot from this bill. Like I said, now that they can incorporate what they already have as a following into their business side in this NIL bill. There are also other schools who are entering some uncharted territory, and some of them may not know how to handle it, but then there are those others who have hired additional athletic department staff to focus on these athletes and dealing with this bill. Some of those schools are the Nebraska, Colorado, Florida State, Arkansas, Duquesne, and St. John's. And you look at some of these names, like we say as a fan, and you see the Duquesnes, a little bit most recently the St. John's, that are not as prominent as, like we mentioned, the SEC schools or the ACC school, Florida State, the big time school, Nebraska. But, and it says here, out of 65 Power 5 universities, 53 have already announced some sort of NIL related initiative. So there you have it, folks. There's the proof that, again, like we just told you, the NCAA is not going to completely go away.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's 65 out of Power 5 universities. So 65 total that they call Power 5 universities. 53 have already announced some sort of NIL related initiative. And that basically means they're going to figure out a way where they can recoup some funds in this whole thing, along with the student athlete getting some compensation and things of that nature.
Well, think about this, and I'm glad I saved this. But you know, some of the things that people don't realize or haven't went into details about it when we talk about a lot of those SEC schools that signed off on it. In Georgia, said the NIL law gives in-state schools the ability to require that students, athletes share up to 75% of the NIL compensation. That total will be pooled into an escrow account controlled by the athletics department and then distributed upon graduation or 1 year after the athlete leaves school, with disbursement based on the number of months the individual was a student athlete. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, okay, they're using my likeness and I got this money coming in every week.
Right.
No, it's upon exiting the school. But look who's in control of the money. The school's athletic department. Mm-hmm. So those players still don't have control over the funds.
Right.
So if, let's just say you did this year, you coming back next year, you still ain't touched that money.
Nope.
Who's getting the interest?
Yeah, how about that?
Where's the interest going?
Basically, these guys are going to be getting a stipend.
So when we talk about the loophole, exactly.
They're going to
when we talk about the loophole, here's the loophole.
Absolutely.
That money makes interest because it's sitting. What account is it in? Well, 9 times out of 10, it's in the athletic department or that school's account. Mm-hmm. So you can't tell me that any money that's put in those accounts don't make money off the money.
Oh yeah, it definitely does.
So do those players get access to the interest earned off the money of their likeness? That's another question. You know what I mean? Alabama prevents athletes from entering into the agreement with the company advertising any tobacco product, alcoholic beverages, marijuana, adult entertainment, or gambling. Mm-hmm. So they cannot wear any item of clothing of any of those things while wearing athletic gear or uniforms. Mm-hmm. It's a licensure agreement. You know what I mean? So it's still stuff that they have not.
It's a lot of gray areas,
And so when you look at it, it's cool to be able to get money off your likeness, but I guarantee you something. If the NCAA, who over the last 100 years have made money off this sport, they will continue to find ways to make money off this sport. And until there's a big depletion of athletes.
This is arguably the reason why there wasn't much flack in this bill. Mm-hmm. There was some opposing at first, but we all know, just like we just sat here and figured out, oh, there's some gray areas to be had in this. And with the NCAA, billion-dollar conglomerate, they figured out the loopholes. They figured out the gray areas where, oh, so we can do it this way, and then we still gonna get some of that cake.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, like I mentioned in the opening, due to this bill, there was a defensive end at Jackson State, HBCU,
Mm-hmm.
who Baldy has been mentioning. This could also add more
Mm-hmm.
leverage and wiggle room into athletes thinking, I can go, NIL bill is in effect, I can go there, and worst case scenario, I got some money in escrow that I can do some things with if I want to, and then I'll already be in a business and I can learn as we go along. But the defensive end has been inked. His name is Antoine Owens.
Mm-hmm.
He has been inked with Three Kings Grooming, a black-owned hair product business that made the first flash of what is expected to be a historic tide-turning date for athletes across the country. Doesn't say exactly how much the deal is worth, which is great. I totally get that. But now you have some help for some small black-owned businesses.
Yeah. Well, think about this. So, in February, it said, according to a study published February by Temple University, TU, Temple University School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management, former Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence had the highest value Instagram account among college athletes, with an annual value of $330,000. So his activity of being a prime athlete and his activity of Instagram would have netted him $330,000 a year.
Yep.
So that's when, but here's the kick. It says 330,000, but if they're going off of that NIL agreement, according to what school you go to, you went to Clemson, not Georgia, then that portion is shared.
Yep.
It's shared, and
Yeah.
even if they took half,
And then the athlete's getting shortchanged.
still getting shortchanged. So what they saying is, we're gonna allow you to get a little bit, but we need a little bit too.
Yeah. Yep.
But you're already getting a lot of it.
Right.
You're already getting a lot of it. The minute that I was a 5-star athlete, and I decided to go to your school, tickets went up.
Yep.
Everything went up. Shirt, apparel, shoe, all that stuff went up. You know what I mean? So you're still in the billions. Why you got to take 150,000 from it,
Absolutely.
or 70,000, or 50,000? Why do you still feel like you need a piece of that when me being here just netted you $4 billion?
Yeah. Yep.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's kind of crazy.
You know, and like you say, it's a definite step in the right direction. And again, I was happy for it, you know, and I'm still happy for it because I think it's long overdue. But somewhere down the line, one of these athletes is going to get in contact or come in contact with the right agent or the right company, and there's going to be some more discussions.
They're going to expose.
There's going to be some changes somewhere down the line, I believe, in this whole thing.
Well, you know, any law that's presented initially has the ability to be changed over time.
Absolutely.
It just has to see how it works on the floor first.
Yep.
So they trying to work through to see how it works and see how many complaints they get off of it.
So they'll know how to go.
So they'll know how to go
both
about
sides will know how to
Yeah.
recoup some stuff.
They'll
Like
see how
the athlete side of trying to figure out how to get more.
That's what I'm about to say. And also
they'll
the
try to
university.
hold on to as much.
And the university trying to see how they can get some more.
Trying to hold on too much if not get more. So again, kudos to the NCAA for allowing this to happen, and you know, it's a great thing. Like we said, a definite step in the right direction, and we know somewhere down the line there's going to be more discussion and there's going to be some tweaking going on in this. So finally, we move on to discuss Miss Sha'Carri Richardson, and I have to do it. I had to bring it to this show because there were, in my opinion, a plethora of mixed reviews in the post, social media, and in this whole situation. So just for background and purposes of bringing you up to speed, young lady Sha'Carri Richardson, the track star, set all kinds of individual records. Okay. Recently, it just came out that she tested positive for marijuana, stemming from, and this is from some of her own explanation. If you didn't know her, she lost her mother. I believe it was 2 days before she was to run in the tribes, and then after the fact, still during the trials, she was apparently going. And I'm just guesstimating here. She was going through something. She smoked a little bit of weed. Now, me personally, as a member of the media, I understand, and a sports fan as well, I understand the other side, if you will, as far as the committee and their rules and regulations and the guidelines and things of that nature. And, you know, all those athletes are aware of drugs that are banned by that committee. And rules are rules, and rules have been broken. And if you're at that level, I have no issue with the employer, if you will, disciplining their employees for things that they know. It would be somewhat different if the employee did not know certain things, but the employees know these things. So in her defense, I was glad that she quickly got the opportunity to voice her opinion and tell her side of the story. I was extremely proud of her in her taking ownership of her miscues, if you will. I also feel like this is like the perfect opportunity for the committee to possibly rethink their rules a little bit.
Yeah.
Because as we all know, marijuana is not a performance enhancing drug.
It is a depressant.
And these are just my opinions right now. Not that we know that fact, but what I'm getting ready to say next are just my opinions. So on the other side of that, like I said, I still understand the rules and regulations in that, and we know that marijuana, again, is not a performance enhancing drug. So in my opinion, and just my opinion, I feel like these committees and at these levels should base their banning or making substances illegal on performance enhancing. Things that will give you an advantage in your particular event, sport, or whatever. I think it should be based on that. I also mentioned that I felt a little bit like this situation was heading into the being blown out of proportion stage, where there was a young black female who set these records, and like Baldy mentioned before we went on air, a young black female that is totally being herself. The tattoos, the orange hair. She won that race, and she immediately ran up into the stands to see her grandmother. So she was being herself. And I can't definitely say, but I'm going to guess that her smoking that little bit of marijuana is part of her being her before she got to being where she is right now. So I understand where she was in that situation. And I posted some things, and a lot of people mentioned or brought into effect the Michael Phelps situation, that he smoked weed. And then people also pointed out that it was after the Olympics and things of that nature, and that he lost endorsements and all of that. And I totally get that. And I was never ever comparing the two situations. I was just taking from what I saw on social media and what I saw from what I posted and some of my followers posted, and replying and giving my stand on what was replied. I also mentioned in that situation that we all notice that there is still racism in sports. And I was not laying racism into this particular incident. No way, shape, or form. I was just letting people know that there is racism in sports. And it's very easy for people to bring that argument up in this situation or in this incident. I didn't do it personally for this incident, but I know it goes on but it's very easy for other people to bring it up in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I feel the way I feel about it is some of the things that could possibly go on. And I got a comment where people reminded me that Michael Phelps lost endorsement deals after the fact and this and that. But the key word in that situation, and then it kind of ties into this whole incident and this comparison of these two, is after the fact. He was already established with these endorsements, and then he smoked weed, and then they took the endorsements away and whatever. On the flip side, this young lady, being a young African American female, doing what she did at the level that she did it, again, her being herself in her appearance and her demeanor, this is something that could arguably be held over her head later on down the line, because she cannot participate in the individual events, but because she accepted the 30-day suspension willingly, there's a strong possibility that she could still participate in the relay.
Right.
So, like me and Baldy talked a little bit, she'll probably run the last leg of that relay, and we know what she can do individually. So there's some times she can make up, and she could arguably get a little bit more recognition than the other three runners, because she was the final leg. And then some of these backlash things could be held over her head and have people look at her and second guess themselves as far as giving her endorsement opportunities, because that might have been looking at her now,
right? And
they're like, well, let's wait and see how big she get. Again, with that win-win situation, if she gets bigger than this, it could be a win for both of them. You can get a little bit more money, and she can get a little bit more money, or whatever. So now it poses, or it opens that door to where people or some of these companies could kind of hold that over her head and move on, and it could be a win-loss for her.
Right.
And I say that because they could still have her endorse certain things or give her endorsement deals, but it's not going to be as prominent as it would have been had this incident not happened. So I wanted to clear that up. And again, like I said, I want to say that some people agree with me, a lot of people agree with me, as a matter of fact, that the rules need to be changed. There's a lot of national media who have also chimed in and said that those rules need to be adjusted or changed. Some people even brought up the fact that now marijuana is legal in so many states. I think it's 18 states across the country now, Oregon being one of them. But like my partner brought up, and I'll let him take it from here after I give you what he said. He said Oregon is a state that marijuana is legal. But he also broke it down a little further, and he said you can be at this state and marijuana be legal, but you could work or have an employer that does not allow smoking of marijuana.
Yeah.
So here we have this conundrum, or this collision, if you will, and it's just weird. It's strange at how some people argue that, you know, the weed or marijuana is legal in Oregon, so yeah, but again, and just to piggyback, and I'll let Baldy take over, what I said to him was, yeah, you're right, Oregon is, but she was just in Oregon for work. She's not a resident of Oregon. She was there to do a job. So she's still under the guidelines of her employer, although Oregon is a state where marijuana is legal.
Yeah, and I mean that's the holistic view of what's going on. You know, like we say, I do construction work. There are jobs that I go on that you have to get tested for certain things. Working in hospitals, you have to get tested for. Now, if they don't allow weed, opioids, any other substance in your body to be in that facility, you can't work there. Doesn't matter what the state of Pennsylvania says, if it's legal or not.
Absolutely.
CHOP says you can't be in here with it.
Right.
So it's the same thing. You know what I mean? She's part of the Olympic division that you get tested. And she took She took responsibility
Yeah.
for what
and
she did.
I definitely applaud her for that.
She did not try to tap dance around it. She accepted
Absolutely.
it. It is what it is. She gonna go ahead and do her time. She took the
Mhm.
plea, like you said. So instead of getting those 3 months, she got 1.
Yep.
But what we go back to and what I was saying before, I honestly believe that because of her 2 trainers, that plays a big part. We're having Dennis Mitchell and Justin Gatlin being her trainers, and then they were trained by Trevor Graham, who was part of the Balco whole fiasco. You know what I mean? And so if a lot of people don't understand what the Balco situation was, that was the whole Barry Bonds stuff and all that with the performance enhancement stuff and all that. And these 2 dudes were products of it.
Yep.
They were banned. Well, what Dennis Mitchell was banned back in '88, which was they considered the dirtiest 100-meter race ever.
Yep.
He was also banned again. He was banned about 4 times. And think about when he was caught with the extra amount of testosterone in his body. He told them, "Listen, I had some beers. You know what I mean? I made love with my lady about 4 times. You know, that's what the extra testosterone was about." And then Justin Gatlin was the same way. He got hit twice.
Right.
He got hit twice. And they almost banned him for life. Almost a 9-year suspension, but it wound up being like a 3 to 4 year suspension. So these are the guys that are training her. And when asked about their background, she said, "Listen, you don't have to worry about that with me. But I got 100% confidence in what they're teaching me.
Right.
I've been doing this all my life." You know what I mean? But that still doesn't count for the fact that you're in the shadows of deception. Because of what these dudes had did in the field, the track and field, and their name has dirt on it.
Yep.
Anybody that they bring in the element, well, you dirty.
Yep.
And then this is like, see, oh, that's Dennis Mitchell and them girl. Yeah, see?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so she's taking a hit in a way that she should. Is not fair.
Absolutely.
But here's the crazy part about it. It's weed. It ain't what they was doing.
Right.
So again, she's right. You don't have to worry about that about me with that. Because that's not my lane.
Nope.
You know what I mean? I'm confident in what they're teaching me physically as a runner, tactically as a runner, and that has nothing, should have no spell on me, but in reality it does.
It does. And again, we talking about this situation. It's so tricky, and I'm just sitting here thinking about it. It's so tricky because marijuana is now being used for medicinal purposes. So what if there had been an instance where they said to her, "Okay, well, you smoke some weed, you got some weed in your system, and we gonna ban you, suspend you, and take your regular way." Pause, time out. Sixers call time. I have a prescription for that.
Yeah.
I just lost my mother. She was ill up until the point that she passed. I was going through some things, and I have a prescription for that. Then how would the story be, or how would the story be rewritten?
Are they
Or
allowed
retold?
to have a prescription for it?
And that's what I mean too. That
be a
part too.
runner.
Are
Yeah.
they allowed to have that prescription?
And I don't think they want to open up them floodgates.
So they won't open that. I mean, you've seen here recently the NBA has now taken marijuana off of their list of banned substances. And usually when you're at that competitive level, it's mostly the, again, performance enhancing drugs. Which is why she made it clear, like Baldy just told you, you don't have to worry about me with none of that. Those are my trainers. But as a runner, doing what I do, knowing what they did, just the running part, I know 100% belief that they can give me some tools to be as successful, if not more successful than they were.
Mm-hmm. Well, think about this when you spoke about the NBA and their clause of taking it off their list. Let's go back to not the last, but the one before the players' contract agreement.
Okay.
And in that agreement prior to, it was still on the list, right? But because the NBA had connections to pharmaceuticals, they were getting kickback from pharmaceuticals to prescribe pain medication to players for joint pain and all that stuff. Now, if you got a player that's foregoing the medication, well, that's cutting the NBA out of some money. That's why marijuana stayed on the plate so long, because they knew all of them was smoking it.
Absolutely.
They had to figure a way out of possibly removing it, but still being able to make money. And so the pharmaceutical department lost money by dealing with the NBA by them taking marijuana off the table. Because once they took it off the table, almost 70% of the players are now outright conversation people about smoking marijuana or
and
using THC in general.
They're going into business.
Or they going into business. You know what I mean? And so again with the floodgates, it became a floodgates. But now the pharmaceutical department that deals with the NBA, they take a hit.
Yeah.
They take a big hit. It's all come down to the coin. We
It's
know that.
always.
It all comes down to the coin.
Always.
And when you think about that, we're talking about just basketball players. Now what happens when the NFL do it? And you got 53 guys on every team. That's not including the practice guys.
Teams.
And it's 32 teams. That's not including the practice guys.
Absolutely.
So if that's taken off the table by way of the NFL, and they are not going to be testing people for it, then that's a bigger scale of pain medication. Because think about them dudes, they taking pain medication every day.
Every day.
And this is why Ricky Williams was saying what he was saying. I refuse to take manufactured medication, chemically manufactured medication for aches and pains that I know marijuana, which has its medicinal purposes, can heal my body faster and better.
And it's natural.
And that was the kick. And they still at war over that.
Yep.
In the NFL, because of the paper, the money that's tied to pharmaceuticals in the NFL, man, that thing is through the roof. Because they're ordering, the teams are ordering pain medications through the roof.
Oh yeah, I mean, you saw it in the football movie.
Oh yeah, and they
Any Given Sunday.
And you got so many players that talk about they got addicted to the pain medication.
Yep.
Well, Brett Favre was addicted to the perks.
Yep. And some of them after retirement still are.
They still are because they can't function without it.
That's right.
The opioid in it doesn't allow them to escape from it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And Mike Tyson did the same thing. Talked about it. He's been probably the most mellowest cat over the last five to 7 years since he stopped taking Zoloft.
Yep.
He stopped taking a lot of antidepressant medications. His herb is where he at with it.
Yep.
And you know what I mean? You can argue and all that stuff about people feeling this way or that way, whatever.
And we know how reckless Mike was.
Which Mike do you want? Do you want this Mike? Or do you want the Mike that told the boy, told the boy he'd knock him off and make him love it?
That's right. That's right. So, with that being said, you have our opinions now on that. Hope it was a little bit clearer, live and direct. And again, like you said, we are in favor of some more investigation into that. And again, like you said, it boils down to the coin. Lastly, before we go, folks, you see my partner has on the Temple TU t-shirt.
TU?
If you did not know, if you have been under a rock, in a cave, in a hole, or whatever, America's dad, William Cosby, was released from prison just last week. Also, a lot of mixed reviews on that. And it's been put out that he should never have been incarcerated in the first place, and he cannot be tried again for these alleged crimes. And I'm saying alleged because I don't know what happened. I only know what was told and put out in the media. So, shout outs to him for, being released from prison. And he is, just recently I saw this morning, right back into his activist and intimate thing. There was a slight issue with Felicia Rashad in Howard University, and he is definitely been reported as being in her corner. So shout outs to Bill for doing that. Glad to see you home. Hope you can get back into some things, although I know you're up there in age, but I hope you can recoup some funds that you could possibly have lost while you were incarcerated and get back to a decent standing in society. Folks, that ends today's episode of the SportsRap Podcast. You know where to find me at SportsRap_D on Instagram and Twitter. SportsRap@yahoo.com is the email. The webpage, SportsRapRadio.com. You can catch this video later on this week on YouTube, SportsRap TV. You can also get some of this audio on iHeart, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Baldy?
You can get with me, Aaron Baldy Moore, on Facebook, Ball75 on Instagram.
And again, closing out, shout outs to, once again, Heat 100's own Simply Monica and Philly legend Larry Lair for holding the city down, shutting the city down yesterday at Lou and Chu's 4th of July Made in Philly concert. Shout out to State Property for coming through for your folks and doing that, having the people have something to do, a safe, great event on July the 4th. 12:50, folks, a little bit early, but nonetheless, we covered everything we needed to cover today. In depth, great dialogue, great conversation. Shout out to everybody that tuned in throughout this 2-hour episode, this 2-hour escapade. And it's going to be 87 degrees today, a little warm, not as much as the heat wave in the past week. So check on your elderly, your sick and shut in, make sure they are cool and hydrated, and enjoy your Monday off. Be great on purpose. We will see you all week on social media, and next week right back here in studio. It's your boy D.
It's your boy Ball.
Enjoy the beats to the rhymes. Run DMC.
Mm. 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 Mm.